Hello, I'm Tim. Welcome to my channel. Today I'm going to talk to you about what I read in January. So, January is obviously the first month of the year, and I think I read everything that I set out to read. So, it was a good reading month in some ways. Yeah, so let's just get into what I read first of all. So, the first thing I read these special edition Spider-Man comic books, with each one being a different Disney Mickey Mouse themed front cover. And to kind of give a quick review of these, some of these I really liked, some of these I didn't so much. I do think that they were kind of picking alternate issues of Spider-Man to do, and I wish they'd just picked a solid run, because some of the stories in here had nothing to do with anything else, or all the super interesting things happened in other issues. So I enjoyed it, but overall I'd probably give the run about 3 stars. I thought the art was great, but it's just interesting to see what's next. So the next thing I finished with my son, was Stanley in Space. This is a Flat Stanley book by Jeff Brown. I would have the book, because we got a book of 3 of them, but my son gave it to his best friend. So I think that is a good sign that he really enjoyed them. I found Stanley in Space to be fine. He's not even flat in it. It's kind of the whole point, right? Is that he's Flat Stanley. He's not even flat. They just go to space and meet these aliens who want to invade, but actually they're only like a couple of inches tall, and then their planet has gone through a environmental disaster. So the Lamb Chops, Stanley's family, agrees to take them all home, and so they live at home and build like a model city for them. It's nice. It's okay. I gave it 2 stars. It's fine. The next thing I read was A Heart Divided by Jin Yong. This is the 4th and final book in the Legend of the Condor Heroes series. I say it's probably more volume 4 because it is all one story that's just been split up. God, this was so good. This was a 5-star read for me, and this finished off the story really well. We had culmination, that's the word, of the martial arts tournament storyline. We also had Genghis Khan come back into it and his invasion of China. We had Guo Jing and Lotus really go through the ringer on this. The 2 main characters really go through some hard stuff, much more than in previous volumes. And this book has a lot more to say about war and loss, and honor, and doing the honorable thing can sometimes be doing the wrong thing. Much more than the previous volumes. The previous volumes were much more about just cool kung fu fights and funny, wacky characters. And this also had that, but it also had much more depth. So, yeah, definite 5-star read from me. The next thing was the 3rd Flat Stanley book that was in the trilogy, called Stanley Flat Again, which he becomes flat in this one. So that's good. And he rescues... he goes to the doctors to try and find out why he has become flat, and there's some weird mumbo-jumbo science. Why? Just make it so he's flat. It's Flat Stanley. I'm not looking for a medical diagnosis on why a boy can end up being 3 inches thick. Don't do that. Yeah, but obviously a good sign because my son handed it to his best friend. The next was on my Kindle. That is The Eye of the World, the first book in the Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan. I gave that 3 stars. It's probably between 2 and 3 the more I think about it. I still enjoyed it, but it had some issues for me, which were being a Lord of the Rings ripoff and just not enough happening. But I think the story has stuck with me, and the more I look back on it, I like it. So I'm definitely going to read the next one. I'm not going to read it in February. I've done my February TBR. I'm going to take a bit of a break and try and read some other stuff. Yeah, so I'm definitely going to come back to it. So I gave it 3 stars. The next was also on my Kindle, which was The Cruise of the Dazzler by Jack London. This is the first story that he ever published. It's a very short, quick boys' adventure story about a young man kind of getting out of school and running away to sea, and finding out that it might not be as good as he wanted it to be. So I enjoyed it. Some of the characters I thought were actually quite interesting. Some of the characters were very two-dimensional, but the action was good and it was just exciting. It was full of naval boat terminology that I didn't really understand, but I enjoyed it, so I gave it 4 stars. The next is my mystery book of the month, and that was Benjamin Zephaniah by Verna Wilkins. This is a very quick biography of Benjamin Zephaniah and his start in life and what he went through. And this hit really hard for me because I knew he'd had a rough start in life, but hearing about what him and his mum went through was, yeah, it was something. And how he obviously had an incredible mind for rhymes and rhythms and making people laugh, but he couldn't read or write till he was an adult. So he had all these poems just in his head. Great, really good. 5 stars from me. Really good start to the mystery year of the mystery books. The next I read, finished just at the end of January, was Mother Knows Best. This is the 5th book in the Villains series by Serena Valentino. It has the Two-Face cover. I'll film a review of this because this is going to be the last of the Villains books I think I'll read, because they are all okay. Some of them better than others. This isn't one of the better ones. But as soon as it starts doing something interesting that I really enjoy, it stops and goes back to what it does in all of the other parts of the series, which is the thing that I don't enjoy. So that is the characters of the Odd Sisters, who are these 3 witches that have turned up in every story. And to start with, they were side characters. And it was like, oh, they were kind of like the Nick Fury or the Agent Coulson of the MCU, as in they just kind of turn up and you're like, oh, I recognise them. But then they become bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then from the third book they really take over, the Ursula book, Poor Unfortunate Souls. And then the 4th book, they're in it but not as much. And then this one, it's really good, and then they turn up. And the ending of this is very similar to Poor Unfortunate Souls, in which we just get the last 50 pages just like all of Tangled. And it's like, I actually found the stuff that was really different from Tangled to be more interesting, with Gothel and her character and what she was going through and all that kind of stuff. And I think the prose is fine. I think this is kind of good for about 10-year-old kids, I would say. But it definitely... the prose isn't great. The prose isn't good enough to carry the major flaws I have in each story, which are the Odd Sisters. Characters who are two-dimensional and just appear... Yeah. So for me, this is 3 stars. I don't dislike it. If you like this series, that's fine. But for me, those are all the 5 books that I had, and I'm not going to buy any more. If someone buys them for me, or if they're in a mystery challenge, that's fine. But I'm okay. And then the last book we read was finishing with Matilda. Let me just... This is our version of Matilda here. So, Matilda by Roald Dahl. Read this to our kids. My kids love Matilda. They love the show. They love the film. They love the film of the show. And they really like the book. They love Matilda and her powers. They love Miss Trunchbull as a villain, is brilliant. They like that she gets her comeuppance. They like the pranks that she plays on the parents. But one section, this is quite a long book. This is 240 pages, and it's got beautiful art by Quentin Blake. There's a bit of her practicing her eyes. I really like that, where she's like looking, staring. Yeah. There's one bit towards the end where the chapters get a lot longer. So we would read to our kids before bed, and you get to a point where like usually the chapters are like 5 to 6 pages and very easy, and then they become like, there's one point where a chapter is like 10 or 15 pages, and it's just too long. Like, it's too long to keep their attention for us to read. And it was all about when Matilda goes to Miss Honey's cottage and sees that she's really poor and she has nothing, and then Miss Honey tells her story of her father and Miss Trunchbull. Really good. As adults, the kids just were... It lost the kids for a bit. And they just didn't retain it very well. Yeah, they didn't. It just didn't quite work. So it's still a 4-star read, and I think they still love the show and the songs from the show, and they love the films. So yeah, Matilda's still really popular. But I do think that like 15-20 pages could, if that had just been a little bit less, or maybe the kids are a bit more older to kind of appreciate it, then easy 5-star read. Yeah, so that was everything. So in terms of my goals that I wanted to achieve for the year, I'm going to do a quick check-in. In terms of reading a mystery book, tick. Start reading a big new fantasy book for me, tick, with Eye of the World. Reading a Jack London book, tick, with The Cruise of the Dazzler. Reading a book about or set in Japan or China, tick, pleased with that. One thing though is pushing my average book pages up, like average pages per book. Didn't work with this because of these. So I read this first comic at the end of December, but the rest of them were 11. So in total, I read 2,930 pages, which is the most I've ever read in a month. Ever. That I can remember. Ever since I started tracking. Most I've ever read in a month. Amazing. Also, 20 books, which is the most I've ever read in a month. Amazing. But 11 of them were these. So, in total, my actual average book length was 146.5 pages. Which is really not very high. So, yeah. Those are it in terms of comics, I think, for a while. So hopefully the next I could push up that average number of pages. In terms of average rating, 3.3. So it was an okay month. And I think my book of the month is between these two, which are obviously very different. This one got me much harder, I think. Yeah, this was an incredible end to the series and nailed the ending in a really good way, and this is the best of the series, I think, for me. I do like A Bond Divided, or whatever it's called. A Bond Undone, the second one. That's really good. Anyway, but this got me only 40 pages. And it made me think about mortality and how our words live beyond us, if possible, and memories live beyond us, and all that kind of thing. So I think that's probably my book of the month. Anyway, that's about January. A really good month, a really strong month. The most books and the most words I've ever read. So I'm really pleased with that. Anyway, let me know what you read in January below. Give this video a thumbs up. I do appreciate it. It does help the algorithm. Do subscribe if you want to see more of my stuff. And anyway, get out of my house!